Alrighty, well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual author talk with Dr. Michael Rockland. He is a professor of American Studies Emeritus at Rutgers University. His early career was in the United States Diplomatic Service, during which he was a cultural attaché in both Argentina and Spain. He is the author of an impressive 16 books, 5 of which have received special recognition and prizes. His first book, Sarmiento's Travels in the United States in 1847, was chosen by the Washington Post Book World as one of the 50 best books of the year. A book he co-wrote, which is the subject of today's talk, Looking for America on the New Jersey Turnpike, was chosen by the New Jersey State Library as one of the 10 best books ever written on New Jersey or by a New Jerseyan. Dr. Rockland has won 7 major teaching/lecturing awards, including the National Teaching Award in American Studies. He has lectured in some 23 countries around the world and is a regular contributor to New Jersey Monthly Magazine. He has also worked in television and film production, mostly for PBS. So welcome, Dr. Rockland. We are excited to have you speak today.
Thanks very much, Andrew.
Before we jump into the talk, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. First, we will be taking your questions at the end of the talk, but please feel free to submit them at any time using the Q&A or the chat features in Zoom. There will be a survey available at the end of the webinar, so if you have time, we ask that you please complete the survey. We always appreciate any feedback that you can provide. And if you're looking to maybe get a copy of the topic today, Looking for America on the New Jersey Turnpike, there is a web address on the screen there. I will send that out in the chat so that you have a live link to it. One note, though, is that Dr. Rockland will be updating that book in the next year or two with a new introductory essay section. So you may want to hold off and wait for the second edition when that comes available, but it is your choice. And then lastly, before we jump into the talk, I just want to do a brief overview of the Zoom dashboard in case you're not familiar. This is what your dashboard should look like if you're using a PC or a Mac. If you're using a mobile device, the dashboard may look a little bit different, but all of the features will still be there. In the bottom left-hand corner, you will see your audio settings. This is where you can check to make sure that any external listening devices like earbuds or headset are connected properly. At any point during the presentation, if you run into any issues, there is a raise hand button here in the middle. You can click on that. That'll alert me, and I will send you a message in Zoom and hopefully be able to resolve any problems that you are having. And as I mentioned before, if you have any questions or if you have any stories of the New Jersey Turnpike that you would like to share, please feel free to use either the Q&A or the chat button to send them, and any questions we will address at the end of the presentation. So that is everything that I have for you. So it's my pleasure now to turn it over to Dr. Rockland.
Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here. And as Andrew said, I have a certain affection for the State Library, special affection, given how they honored this book. And by this book, I hope you can see it. I was told to hold it up like that.
It looks good.
It looks okay now?
Yeah.
Good. Anyway, that's the cover. And you can see there's a surrealistic painting of the turnpike that was done by a Trenton, New Jersey artist. And when I found that, I said, that's the cover. One other thing I might say with respect to the cover is the title, Looking for America on the New Jersey Turnpike. You may recognize those words. They're from Paul Simon's wonderful song, America. The last lines of which go, counting the cars on the New Jersey Turnpike, they all came to look for America. And in a sense, when my colleague and I wrote this book together, and a word more on that in a moment, we were searching around for a title. And at first we had a boring academic title. You'd always know there's something the matter with a title if it has a colon in it. usually, usually the first part's good enough, and what's after the colon explains what the title was about, and we were trying to avoid that. So we loved his line. We all came to look for America. They all came. The cars on the turnpike all came to look for America, and we wanted to look for America. We wanted to use this road, not just to talk about traffic and things like that, but the American character, the American spirit. Why is this road, we thought, representative of American ideas and values? Good and bad, good and bad, both. And so again, that's where the title comes from. And I mentioned that I wrote this book with my friend and colleague, Professor Angus Gillespie of my department, of the American Studies Department. It was his idea, by the way, not mine. It was his idea. I was working on a novel at the time, and he was having trouble with the Turnpike book and asked, would I write it with him? I was having trouble with the novel I was writing called A Bliss Case, because I go back and forth between fiction and nonfiction. People often ask me, how do you handle the schizophrenic aspect of not only writing fiction and nonfiction, but doing them at the same time? And my answer is, how do you not? So if you looked at my books, you'd see that in certain years, I came out with both a fiction book and a nonfiction book, either that year or the year after. And I find, as some of you may find, that doing two things at once takes all the stress off me, and my imagination flows. And when I'm working on one thing, I'm worried about that one thing. I'm worried about, if I'm working on two things, I don't worry about it. And also writing a book with somebody else, which I've done twice now, in some ways it's twice as hard as writing it by yourself, because it's a constant negotiation. Their ideas are as good as yours or better, and then you have your ideas, and so you're constantly negotiating back and forth. I've done two books that way, as I said, one with Angus Gillespie, the Turnpike book, and the other one with my wife. And I don't know if this is true or not, but given that my early career was in the diplomatic service with our embassies in those two countries, as Andrew mentioned, I'd like to believe that maybe it was my diplomatic skills which guarantee that these relationships, both of them, are still intact, because writing a book with somebody else is a recipe for disaster in your relationship. It's really hard to stay with each other and not take personally the other person's critique of your ideas, your critique of their ideas, and be understanding of that, and realize that those critiques are essential and necessary and will make it a better book in the long run. As Andrew mentioned before, well, this book was really a great surprise to its author, its authors. We were happy to write it. We thought it was well done. When we received the review by the Sunday Times Book Review, we were pleasantly surprised at how positive it was and celebratory it was. Wow. who wants to read a book about the New Jersey Turnpike? Even though we wrote one, I'm not sure if somebody else wrote one that I would have wanted to read a book on the Jersey Turnpike, but the New York Times made it very exciting. And then, as Andrew mentioned, the State Library, which is sponsoring my talk today, all these years later, we wrote the book between 1987 and 1989. And then when the State Library came out with this list of the 10 best books ever written on New Jersey or by a New Jerseyan, and we were on it, we just couldn't believe it. We were shocked, is all I can say. Because if you look at that list, it had, just to name a few, Walt Whitman, who lived in Camden in his declining years and put out the last edition of Leaves of Grass while he was living in Camden. And then F. Scott Fitzgerald was on the list, the great Gatsby fellow, although he was on the list for his early novel, This Side of Paradise, based on his years as a Princeton student. Philip Roth, of course, was on the list, and Allen Ginsberg, and you can go on. And these were writers of heavy tonnage. And we kept thinking, was the State Library desperate for a 10th book that they put on a list? It wanted a nonfiction book because almost all the other books were poetry or fiction. We'll never know, but we were thrilled. And of course, then people bought the book like crazy, and it sold out, and then they did another edition, and that sold out. They did another edition, and that sold out. I mean, I don't write to make money, but I do write to get readers rather, and that was really kind of thrilling to have so many readers, and on a book that we ourselves had not thought was a great book. We thought it was a very good book. We'd have maybe given it a B+, but now we were being given an A+, and maybe it was just luck. I don't know. I'll never know. But as a writer, you get used to the notion that sometimes you do something and you think it's the best thing you've ever done and nobody pays any attention to it. And then you do something else which you think is pretty good, and in this case was celebrated in this very, very special way. Now, we're currently involved in doing not so much a new edition. We wouldn't have to do that, but much has happened since 1989 to the Turnpike, and I want to just mention those things. First of all, and you may know this, you may know all of these things, or they may be new to you. Either way, the first one was the consolidation of the Garden State with the Turnpike. The Garden State is still there, but it's under the jurisdiction of the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. The New Jersey Turnpike Authority moved to a big building in Woodbridge, used to be just outside of New Brunswick. It's in Woodbridge. It's the old Hess building, Hess, the oil building. Big building, and so the Garden State is part of the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. A lot of people who love the Garden State and love the name of it even were very disappointed. I mean, it's still called the Garden State Parkway, and it's a very different kind of road, turnpike and a parkway, just the word park tells us something. Many of us prefer one over the other, but a parkway is one that's going to have a lot of green, a lot of trees, grass, whatever. And certainly the northern stretches of the turnpike, well, they go through the industrial center, possibly of the world, not just the United States. That area where the turnpike is passing Newark Airport and planes are coming in practically with their wheels touching the top of your car, so you think, but they're awful close, is really extraordinary. And then similarly, the Conrail train yards are there, and similarly, the port is there. Interesting, isn't it, that it used to be called the Port of New York, but about 80% of it is in New Jersey. Our friends across the river, it's taken a lot for them to recognize that, wait, so it's now called the Port of New York and New Jersey. It really almost should be called the Port of New Jersey, because Port Elizabeth, and Port Newark are really where it's happening. Ocean liners may land at Manhattan. That's about it in New York. So anyway, these changes, which were critical, the consolidation with the Garden State, number one. Second, Easy Pass. Sometimes it's hard to remember before Easy Pass, but you can remember the lines at the toll booths, and also these were seen sometimes of a heck of a lot of rear end crashes. Somebody was coming up on the booth and wasn't paying attention and crashed into the car in front of them. So it's nice that it's a safety feature too, quite apart from it making things easy. You don't have to have money with you to ride the turnpike. And they've even started to put up these overhead gantries, which read your license plate as you're going through, and you have a contract, and you pay your bill or keep money in it in an account. And I mean, it's a very different way of riding the turnpike. And the Garden State, by the way, is in some ways ahead of the turnpike in this respect. There are more overhead gantries reading the miles that you have gone and charging you for it automatically, and you don't even have to slow down. I mean, it's a very different way of riding the turnpike. So the Easy Pass certainly was enormously important since 1989. I'd say the third most important thing was the creation of the widening from exits 9 down to 6. And by the way, I'm using the word exits because we all use it. The turnpike officially considers these interchanges. Most of us say exits, but when you think of it, it's rather silly because sometimes we exit, half the time we exit, but half the time we enter at the exit. Somebody say, "What exit are you taking?" I'm taking exit, whatever, 10. But you're entering. You're not exiting, you're entering. Exit 10. So the official word is interchanges, even though I suspect I'll be calling them exits for the rest of my life anyway. And so the widening of 9 down to 6, tremendous project, because you may recall, after you passed 9, you got into some terrible traffic, whether you were on the truck side or the car side. Why? Because the number of exits from 6 South from 9 South was limited. I'm sorry, not the number of exits, the number of lanes was limited. And you had half as many lanes as you got to 9. And so just below 9, actually at about 8A is where they came together, and you had all this traffic smushed together, if you will. And it's a whole lot nicer and easier that we can just keep going. And south of 6, the traffic becomes considerably less anyway. So that was quite a change, and it was protested by a lot of people whose homes were going to be affected by now being up against the widened turnpike, and lots of noise, barrier walls had to be put up and all that sort of thing. From a traffic point of view, it was a great thing. From the point of view of people who had to give up their homes, it was not such a great thing. And now, before I get off the subject of widening, the great controversy right now is the Turnpike's proposal to widen, in the same way, what's not actually technically called the Newark Bay hyphen Jersey City extension, and exits 14A, B, and C, which take you to the Science Museum, or take you to the park, Liberty State Park, or take you to the Holland Tunnel. And it's very interesting, the debate. It's in the papers almost every day. The mayor of Jersey City is fighting it like crazy. He says, we can barely breathe in Jersey City, and you're just going to give us a lot more traffic. And then we really won't be able, the air quality will be terrible. The Turnpike answers, no, it won't. We're widening it, and so there'll be less traffic, and it'll be better for everybody. But there are people who argue, and I'm not sure what I think about this personally, who argue that when you widen a road, you don't improve the traffic situation, you just attract more traffic. I leave that question with you as to how you might feel about it. But it is the great issue right now. So the last of the changes since 1989 is that the Turnpike has begun to really improve what we all call rest areas. The Turnpike itself calls them service areas, which makes better sense, because I don't know about you, but I've never rested in a rest area. It's funny how we use these euphemistic terms, like we say restroom. I'm going to the restroom. That I know of, nobody rests in restrooms. But they are euphemistic, and even calling it a rest area is euphemistic. Anyway, the official term is service areas, and it began with Hurricane Sandy, there was a creek behind the Grove of Cleveland rest area called the Woodbridge Creek. And that creek so expanded and so overcame its banks that it completely flooded and destroyed the Grove of Cleveland rest area. It simply couldn't be saved. And so they built a new one now. And I must say, it's really attractive. It's great to see. And if you've traveled up and down the turnpike in recent times, you've noticed that half the rest areas are closed. And the reason that they're closed, or service areas, sorry, are closed. And they're closed because they're building new facilities in each of them. And if they're half as nice as the one they built in the Grove of Cleveland, we'll all be better off, I think. That's nice to see. So again, the fourth change since 1989 is the beginning of improving the rest areas. The Grove of Cleveland is done. I think the Vincent Body is done. The others they're working on. Oh, by the way, and speaking of rest areas, of course, there are rest areas on the Garden State. And while the Turnpike rest areas are named after figures in history, the Garden State rest areas are named after much more contemporary figures, including folks who are very much functioning right now. John Bon Jovi, for example, Judy Blume. One's going to be named after the great baseball player, Larry Doby, a New Jerseyan, who was the second African-American to come into the major league shortly after Jackie Robinson, and still holds major league records to this day in baseball. And they're naming one after Frank Sinatra also. He's not alive, but certainly a contemporary figure compared to colonial figures who are among those that the Turnpike is named after. So the Turnpike rest areas are named after historic figures, and the Garden State after contemporary or recent figures, shall we say. And I think it's kind of great. One thing that my colleague and I, and Angus and Gillespie and I, take great pleasure in is one of the things that we argued in our book was, hey, look, if you're going to name rest areas or service areas in the Turnpike after historic figures, shouldn't we know something about these historic figures? Can't you take your educational responsibilities seriously a little bit, so that when children walk into a rest area, they think that Grove of Cleveland again, that Grove of Cleveland is actually Roy Rogers, because there were essentially nothing. There was essentially nothing said about the honorees. So in a couple of cases, a little bit. And we were saying, hey, for very little money, why don't you really have a little mini museum on the entrance to the service area, so that children, but adults as well, will know who these people are and why they're being honored. And we're terribly happy that the Turnpike has begun to do exactly that, and do a good job of it too, on both the Turnpike and the Garden State. very little money involved in doing that. You come in the door and there you learn about this person if you wish to. I had two funny experiences while I was while we were writing the first edition of the book back that came out in 1989, and the new edition we hope to turn in within the next month or so. And again, it'll be the same book, except it'll have a long introductory essay on the changes, and it'll have a lot of photographs, whereas there were drawings in the first book, done by one of our students, as a matter of fact. Excellent drawings, but we want to have some really stunning photographs. So there I was in the Walt Whitman when we were writing the book the first time, and I interviewed somebody working there, and I said, what's it like to work here in the Walt Whitman? And she said, who's Walt Whitman? I said, well, what do you mean, who's Walt Whitman? You told me you've been working in the Walt Whitman rest area for 12 years. Sure, certainly. She said, no, I've never heard of Walt Whitman. We see a sign, Walt Whitman rest area coming up. I think it says rest area, not service area, but whatever. And so we know we're entering the Walt Whitman, but she lives in a nearby town and doesn't go to work on the turnpike. There's a little parking lot for all employees in the concession area. It's just beyond where the rest of us park, a little gate, and then they park there and they come through the gate. And they never used to, because there was nothing said about the honorees, knew where they were working. That this was Walt Whitman and who was Walt Whitman and why is he to be honored on the turnpike, et cetera, et cetera. I really had a funny experience. I went and lived in the Joyce Kilmer rest area for 24 hours. And by the way, when I say it was me. When we wrote the book, we had this interesting problem. Would we say everything that Michael did, and would we say everything that Angus did, and keep those two things separate? The readers would get awfully confused after a while. So we decided to use we all the way through the book. And we were a little concerned that people might say to us, what are you, Siamese twins? You go everywhere together? And it's never happened. Nobody's ever said, who's we? How could we do something that one person obviously did? We just say we all through the book. The idea given to us by a friend, and it worked. So anyway, I'm living in the Joyce Kilmer. I decided to stay there for 24 hours. There were 3 shifts of employees in the Roy Rogers, and I had to address the manager, 3 managers during that time, and say, hey, look, once in a while, I'm gonna have to put my head down on a table and go to sleep. I want you to know I'm here to write a book. I'm not a derelict person. I'm here and I need to just go sleep once in a while. So that was clear. That was okay. And I could get food when I was hungry and go to the bathroom. And so I don't know how many people could say they lived in the Joyce Kilmer rest area 24 hours, but I did. And when I wanted to do something for variety's sake, I would go outside and I would ask people as they were coming into the service area, rest area, do you know who Joyce Kilmer was? Most people would pass me by thinking I was trying to sell them something, but many answered. And what they answered was, no, I have no idea who she was. Joyce Kilmer was a man, a boy named Sue, as the Johnny Cash song once went. And was a poet, killed in World War I, by the way. And of the 75 people that I asked who Joyce Kilmer was, there was only one person, a high school student, who in class the day before they had done Joyce Kilmer's famous poem, Trees. And she knew exactly who Joyce Kilmer was. There was one person who got there halfway and said that she was a poet. So I got 1.5 right out of 75. And if that didn't convince me that the Turnpike doggone well ought to tell us in the rest areas who these people are, well, that did it. Let's put it. And we tell those stories in the book, and apparently they paid some attention to us, and they really made an effort, and it's getting to be more all the time. And I want to congratulate them for that. It's a very nice thing that it's happening. Obviously, when you write a book, you could go on for 3 or 4 hours about it. But I think I want to end my remarks so that I stay within 40 or 45 minutes with a story of something that happened just recently to me, which kind of blew my mind. Let's put it that way. Perhaps it'll astonish you as well. I'm sitting in my office at Rutgers, and the phone rings. And I have 10 minutes till class. And I debate whether to answer the phone or not. And I figure, well, maybe something short. And I answered the phone, and the guy said, this is Rupert, I never got his last name, from the BBC. And we want to interview you, British Broadcasting. I said, well, thank you. That's very flattering. But I have a class in 10 minutes, so I only have 5 minutes. He said, no, we want to come over and interview you. I said, well, that's fine. That's okay. He says, can you pick us up at Newark Airport on Tuesday? I said, well, Tuesday is a perfect day. It's the one day in a week when I don't have to be at Rutgers. Yes, I could. And he's talking about New Jersey. And by this time, after the Turnpike book, I'd written 2 or 3 other books about New Jersey, or partly about New Jersey. And I thought he wanted to interview me about these new books. And I get a lot of free PR out of it. So I picked them up, and it was them. It was he, a journalist, and a cameraman. Picked them up at Newark Airport. And I had ideas that I was going to take them to pretty places in New Jersey. In particular, I was going to take them over to the Delaware. Indeed, I have a new book coming out with Rutgers that will precede the new edition of the Turnpike book, called The Other Jersey Shore, which is all about why I prefer the Delaware to the beaches. Well, not me, but so much. I try to keep myself out of it, but most New Jerseyans go to the shore. They don't go to the Delaware, and I think the Delaware is, well, I'm sort of much more of a mountain, river, forest kind of guy than a sand guy. Let's put it that way. So I thought they wanted to interview me about that book and that I was working on, and at the time, and other books I've written about New Jersey or New Jersey oriented. And so I said to them, so I wanted to take them over to Delaware and show them these what I consider New Jersey's prettiest towns: Frenchtown, Lambertville, Raven Rock, Stockton. To me, that's where New Jersey is more like Vermont than Vermont is, and it's on this gorgeous river, which, by the way, was recently picked as the best river in America. Quite a distinction. Anyway, that's what I'm planning to do. Or if they don't want to go there, I'll take them to the shore, but wherever. And I say, where would you like to conduct this interview? And they said, on the New Jersey Turnpike. And I realized he was carrying a rather worn copy of the paperback edition of the book. And I said, on the Turnpike? Yeah. Okay. So we got on the Turnpike, and from the back seat, this fellow Rupert asked me questions, and we carried on a conversation. And the cameraman sat alongside me, either shooting my responses or shooting out the window. And when we were going by the refineries and the oil tanks and the airport and the Conrail yards and we're on the Turnpike and planes are coming, and this guy Rupert in the back seat said, "This is marvelous. This is fantastic. This thing just blows me away." And I was thinking, gee, generally we New Jerseyans apologize for this part of the state, and here he is celebrating. He loves it. And I wonder, is this guy crazy, or what is it with him? Anyway, we continued down the Turnpike. We stopped somewhere for coffee, and we kept on going, and we got to the end of the Turnpike. I'd been driving over 100 miles now, and in addition to coming from home, and filled the gas tank at some point, and I knew a secret way from having written the book of turning around. Don't tell the Turnpike or the cops, but a way of turning around. And I turned around because I didn't want to go over the bridge at Delaware and then try to figure out how to turn around, because I knew that would be a mess. I turned around, and now we're on our way north. And we get all the way back to to Newark Airport. And Rupert says to me, it's only 1:30, and our plane going back to London doesn't leave till 8 or 9 tonight. I wonder if you'd mind doing that again. And I said, "You mean driving down to Delaware again and turning around and coming back?" "Yeah," he said, "a lot of other things I'd like to ask you, a lot of other things I'd like to talk about. And we do have the time. And if you would be so kind," that I'm thinking, gosh, these guys from the BBC flew all the way over to see me. Yeah, I'm about to drive another 200 miles, 100 miles each way, at least. Adding up to 400 miles. But I'll try to be as good a host as I can. And we get back on the Turnpike, and we doggone well drive all the way down there again, and turn around and come back, and all the while, Rupert is ecstatic about the Turnpike. He loves the Turnpike. And in a sense, the Turnpike is the iconic American road. It really is. We have plenty of other big roads. There's the Pennsylvania Turnpike. There were all the interstates. But the Turnpike in New Jersey is the embodiment of much of New Jersey ideas and values and culture, whether we like it or not. And so we do that, and we stop somewhere, one service area, another, for lunch in the Roy Rogers. And on the way back, I say to Rupert, I say, whence comes your great affection for the Turnpike? And he says, everybody in London loves the Turnpike. If I had to pick a place in the world where they wouldn't like the Turnpike, it would be London. I had to pick someplace. And they're ecstatic about New Jersey culture. You guys are where it's happening. The energy of this place. You're the guys who produced Bruce Springsteen. You're the guys who produced what may have been the greatest thing to ever appear on television, The Sopranos. And you guys produced the Turnpike. And in his mind, all these three things, a road and a TV show. And by the way, I once had James Gandolfini in my class. He was just a big lug who sat in the back of the room, didn't say anything. I miss him very much. He was the nicest guy in the world. Nothing like Tony Soprano, believe me. Anyway, Rupert, how many times have you been over here? I've never been here, he says. You've never been here? And you love the New Jersey Turnpike? How is this? And he says, people in London, maybe not the people who are still monarchists, but the rest of us think of New Jersey as the very center of American culture, the very embodiment of what America is. And the Turnpike represents that. And that's why we're here. And I just couldn't quite believe it. Let's put it that way. But that's the way he felt. He mentioned, for example, that the show Jersey Boys, the musical Jersey Boys about Frankie Alley, and the Four Seasons, which, by the way, my wife and I were in London earlier in June, and it's still playing because we saw it in London 7 years ago, and now it's still playing in London, but it is closed in New York. Isn't that amazing? It's playing in London, but it closed in New York. And when we saw it 7 years ago, before the show started, we were chatting, and a man sitting next to me said, "Where are you people from?" And we said, "Well, we're Americans." And he said, "Yeah, but where?" And we said, "Well, we're from New Jersey." "Really? You're from New Jersey?" like this was some kind of miracle or somebody met a real New Jerseyan. And and then he at the intermission, we're all out in the lobby, and he's telling everybody in the lobby, those people over there, they're from New Jersey. And people started to gather around us like we were some kind of rock stars because we came from New Jersey. It was the funniest doggone thing. They just, for some reason, maybe just a few people, but the people we met, and certainly Rupert and what he was telling me, they saw New Jersey as a very embodiment of America, and the Turnpike as America's great road, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this was quite an experience. I'd driven 400 miles, 4 times up and down the Turnpike twice, but it was sort of nice to hear him say, yeah. And I've been in London many times, and nobody ever said anything about New Jersey, so I don't know whether what he was saying and what these people at the show were saying 7 years ago. And again, the fact that it's still there, that Jersey Boys is still on the stage. and not in New York. I mean, New York, after all, is where Saturday Night Live makes fun of us all the time. John Belushi years ago used to call New Jersey the armpit of the universe. And think of all the Woody Allen films making fun of us. I'm thinking of Sleeper right now, where he has been wrapped in aluminum foil for 200 years, and he comes out of that and he's asked, did you discover anything interesting during your time in hibernation? And he says, yes, I did. I discovered there's intelligent life in the universe, except in certain parts of New Jersey, he says. And so that's what we're used to, being put down by our brothers and sisters across the river, that we're somehow second-class citizens. We're the beginning of the ill-famed Midwest. We're the beginning of the flyover country until you get to San Francisco, and nothing in America really matters, beginning with New Jersey. And here we are, suddenly being told that we are the center of American culture by these Brits. And I don't really know what to make of it, except it was very flattering. And the fact that this guy comes all the way over and he wants to ride up and down a turnpike all day long is pretty weird, but it happened. And I thought I would close my remarks with this crazy story. And now I'd love to hear from some of you. Questions, comments, criticisms, whatever you might want to say.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rockland. If anybody does have questions, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A or the chat feature, and we'll be happy to answer them. While we're waiting for some questions to pile in, maybe you could talk about your writing process that you went through in writing the book and taking your experiences and compiling them.
Oh, well, thank you for answering that, asking that. At the time, 1987, my colleague has proposed a book on the Turnpike, but he's off in the Philippines on a Fulbright. And he asks me if I would write the book with him, because I was a much more experienced writer, at least at that time. And I'm busy writing my first novel, which I mentioned earlier, A Bliss Case. But I'm not doing very well. I'm very insecure about it. And so when he asked me if I would write the Turnpike book with him, I said, yeah, but you got to come back from the Philippines so we can write the book. And I'll tell Rutgers Press, because he had proposed the book then and said yes, but now they had called me as chair. I was chair of the department. They'd called me and said, is he going to do it or not? Because we're going to give it to somebody else to do. And anyway, I needed some therapy about the novel. And I saw, well, the Turnpike, we had a contract, it was just going to happen. The novel was my first novel. I've written several since, but fiction is something that professors don't normally do. They do, quote, scholarship. I'm putting it in quotes because some of it is called scholarship just because nobody can understand it. Not even their mothers would read it. I wanted, from boyhood on, I wanted to be a writer. And the wonderful thing about being a professor is you're given the time, especially at a place like Rutgers and Princeton, to do what you want to do or what you're called upon to do. And so I agreed to do the Turnpike book with him just to get away from the novel a little bit and do something that was a sure thing and maybe would give me courage for the novel. Well, the crazy thing is the Turnpike book came out, and as you know, it was a terrific success, still is. And as you know, we're doing a new edition now. But while I was working on the Turnpike book, I got all my ideas for how to make the novel really happen. And while I was working on the novel, again, now I was working on a novel, I was working on both of them at the same time. And people say, how do you write nonfiction and fiction at the same time? My answer would be, how do you not? Because one relaxes you about the other, and your imagination flows. I know this if I wake up on a Saturday morning and there's two things that need to be fixed in my house. If there's one thing, it'll drive me nuts. If there's two things, I'm relaxed. I do the easier one first, and then the other one happens too. If it's just one, I'm uptight about it. And so I've now done this 3 times, written a novel and a nonfiction book, essentially at the same time. Maybe I'm the only one in the world who's this crazy in terms of doing this at the same time. After all, a nonfiction book, you're learning everything you can about something, and it's presumably true. And the fiction, you're making it up. I mean, well, making most of it up anyway. And that's how I write. I've been doing this now for years, writing fiction and nonfiction at the same time. And it's probably what I'm most known as a writer for. This crazy guy who writes fiction and nonfiction at the same time. And I've been asked to speak on this. I spoke on Spain on it back in May. They wanted to know how the heck do you do it? And I speak Spanish as well as English based on my years in the diplomatic service. So that's the way I write. And I can't recommend it to anybody. Well, I can. I do recommend it. If you find that you're stuck on something, if you got 2 things going, it'll help you to relax. I got all my ideas for project A all the time while working on B, and I get all my ideas for B while working on A. When I'm working on A, just working on A, I'm tight. I'm worried. When I'm working on 2 things, hey, it's going to be okay. Who cares? That attitude keeps me loose, keeps my imagination flowing, and I guess I do recommend it, especially to anyone who wants to be a writer. It works for me, and it might very well work for you, crazy as it may sound. Hope that took care of my strange writing habits.
We have a couple comments. One's a funny story about the Turnpike. This person grew up in New York, but now live in PA, and obviously have ridden on the Turnpike many times in their life. My family always talked about crazy New Jersey drivers on the Turnpike. So
Crazy New Jersey drivers.
yeah, on the Turnpike.
Yeah, well, I have 2 things to say in response to that. The speed limit is 65. If you're going 65, you're in danger if you're only going 65. obviously you do have some fear that the state police are going to get you. But I try not to travel in the speed lane. They're always watching the speed lane. And if you're not going any faster in either of the other lanes than the people in the speed lanes, you got nothing to worry about, at least in my experience. So, I mean, people are mostly going 80 on the turnpike, not 65. There's a funny story we tell in the book about some young folk who were smoking grass, and they were coming along on the turnpike, and the police pulled them over, and they quickly opened the window, hoping the smell of the marijuana would get out the window. And this, of course, was when marijuana was totally illegal. It's still illegal to smoke and drive at the same time. And the police pulled them over, and the driver said to the police, "Oh, were we speeding, officer?" And he said, "No, you weren't speeding. You were going 10 miles an hour." And yeah, so and then there are these people. Indeed, my colleague on this book, he always likes to ride in the truck lanes. I don't ever want to ride in the truck lanes. He always rides in truck lanes. I said, "Why are you riding in truck lanes?" He said, "Because it's all truck drivers, and they're professionals, and they're not going to go over the speed limit, and they're going to drive very carefully, and I'm more comfortable in the truck lanes." I'm saying, "Well," I say, "Angus, when accidents happen on the turnpike, it's usually a truck that's jackknifed. It's not cars banging into each other. It's usually trucks." But in any case, he wants to ride on the truck side. And I know some guys, also some students of mine, who would say, "I always ride on the truck side." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Real men ride on the truck side." There's some sort of macho thing about being on the truck side. And then if I would bring up the Garden State Parkway, not in its present context as really part of the Turnpike Authority or under their auspices, they say, "Oh yeah, I try to stay. If I have to go to the beach, well, I'm going to the beach, I'll take the turn to Garden State. Otherwise, I don't want to be on the Garden State." Why not? "Well, the Garden State's for women and the Turnpike is for men." I said, "What? That's ridiculous. What? I don't see any feminine connection to the Garden State other than the fact that it's prettier, the Garden State, with all the trees and stuff, and the Turnpike is, well, lots of it anyway, is pretty ugly. And at least the northern part. Although the Turnpike's answer to that, by the way, to the ugliness, is the Turnpike itself isn't ugly. It's what you're looking at. We're not responsible for what you're looking at. We didn't build that. If you ride the Turnpike, you'll see no litter. It's the cleanest road in America. But we're not responsible for what you're seeing out your window. And besides, should we have driven the Turnpike through New Jersey's prettiest areas? No, we did drive it through the industrial center of not only New Jersey, but perhaps the world, on purpose, because we didn't want to put it in the pretty areas, which is interesting, isn't it? That they would do that. And they defend themselves that way. So when people say the Turnpike's ugly, when they're talking about the northern stretches, when you get down the south, it looks like any other road. It's not interesting to me one way or the other. But one thing about the Turnpike that's different from the Garden State, lots of curves on the Garden State. The Turnpike is like an arrow, right down. And in fact, that's one thing that's really the matter with it. When it came to Elizabeth, they went right down the center of Elizabeth. You put a major highway down the center of the city, you destroy the city. You really, or you really do some rotten things to it. It'll never be the same. And it's interesting though, the people who built the Turnpike, they built it in a year and a half. Can you believe it? If you wanted to build a jug handle somewhere, which is a New Jersey invention, by the way. There are two automotive things that are New Jersey inventions. The Jersey barrier, those concrete barriers are now all over the world, and they're all called in other countries, in English, the Jersey barriers. Where I've been, there are Jersey barriers, and people tell me, yeah, that's a Jersey barrier. The other innovation was the jug handle. People come to New Jersey say, New Jerseyans are crazy. You want to make a left turn? You make a right turn to make a left turn? Jug handles are wonderful things. They have saved many, many lives. A lot to be proud of with the Jersey barrier. The Jersey barrier has so cut down on head-on collisions in New Jersey. And the jug handle is a wonderfully wonderful invention, really. And that I know of, perhaps you folks have had this experience elsewhere. I've never seen a jug handle outside of New Jersey. Because people think it's weird to go right, in order to go left. I don't think it's weird. I think it's genius, really, and a wonderful lifesaver and convenience. So, of course, neither of those has to do with the Turnpike itself in particular, but and there are no jug handles on the Turnpike, obviously. So.
Righty, well, I don't see any more questions or anything, so I think we can go ahead and end it there. I'd just like to thank you, Dr. Rockland, for sharing your experiences and the history of the book and kind of some insights into the Turnpike and what it means to be New Jersey and how it kind of relates to our identity. It's very appreciative.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's an honor, especially to be speaking under the auspices of the State Library, given what the State Library did for us, putting us on the 10 best books list. I think either one of us have as incentives that we'll do anything for the State Library. Just ask, we'll do it.
And thank you everybody for attending today. We hopefully think that you got something out of it. And I just want to end by saying be safe, be well, and hopefully we'll see you soon. And again, thank you, Dr. Rockland.
And thank you, Andrew. And thank all of you for being here today on this wonderful sunny day.